Good afternoon, dear
Добрый день,
viewers.
дорогие зрители.
Today,
Сегодня у нас
we
с вами
have the
пятая
fifth meeting
встреча,
with
которая
you,
посвящена
which is devoted to the
этапам
stages of the
большого
long
пути
journey from
от
the cell
клетки
to
до межзвездной
interstellar
цивилизации, и
civilization,
мы с вами
and we
рассмотрим
will look at the prognostic
прогностические
possibilities built
возможности,
on the previous
построенные
four
на
meetings
предыдущих
of the
четырех встречах
model of
модели масштабной
large-scale
гармонии.
harmony. The fact
Дело в
is
том,
that we
что
have
мы
devoted
до
four
этого
meetings to the
встречи
fact that we
посвятили
have
тому, что
considered the
рассмотрели
structure of large-scale
структуру
harmony,
масштабной гармонии,
considered some
рассмотрели
stages,
этапы
considered
какие-то,
similarity,
рассмотрели там
symmetry,
подобие,
where life
симметрию,
is at the center,
где
and
находится
so
жизнь в
on.
центре и так далее.
But
Но
all this was like
все
a
это было
statement
как
of the
бы
basics of
изложение
this
основ
structure.
этой структуры.
Here, but in the
Но в
comments, I
комментариях я вдруг
suddenly
увидел,
saw
что
that
люди
people
не
are
терпятся
impatient to
получить
get
какой-то
some
практический
practical result.
результат.
Since there is
Поскольку
nothing
нет
better
ничего
and more
лучше
practical
и
than a good
практичнее,
theory,
чем
this is
хорошая
not my
теория, это моя
phrase,
фраза, это
this is a
очень
very
известный
famous
ученый сказал,
scientist said.
то мы
Then
попытаемся
today we
сегодня
will
нашу
try to
модель,
use our
которую
model,
мы
which
строим
we
с
are
вами
building
вместе
together with
сейчас,
you now, for
использовать
practical
для
use, namely to
практический
build some
пользы, а
kind
именно
of
построить
fantastic
какое-то
future for all
фантастическое будущее для
mankind,
всего
using the
человечества,
knowledge
используя
that
те
we have
знания,
already
которые мы уже с
purchased with
вами
you
приобрели за
for the
предыдущие
previous
4
four
встречи.
meetings. So we have
Итак, у нас
part
часть
5
пятая
from the
от
cell
клетки
to
до
the
межзвездной
interstellar civilization,
цивилизации, масштабные
large-scale
этапы
stages of a
большого
long
пути.
journey. But
Но прежде
first,
я
I
хотел
wanted to
напомнить,
remind
что
you
все,
that
что мы
everything
с
that we
вами
are
тут
going
будем
to
на
see on
слайдах
the
видеть, это
slides
все
is all built in a
построено
logarithmic
в
system,
системе,
a logarithmic
логарифмической
coordinate system.
системе, так сказать, логарифмической
In this
системы
case,
координат.
this is the
В данном
decimal
случае
logarithm
десятичный
I
логарифм
used,
я
but I
использовал.
want
Еще
to
раз хочу
remind those who
напомнить
do
тем,
not
кто
remember what a decimal
не помнит, что такое
logarithm is.
десятичный логарифм.
Here
Вот
on
на
this
этом слайде
slide,
это видно
it is
хорошо,
clearly
что,
visible that all
так сказать,
dozens,
все
they turn
десятки, они
zeros around one
превращаются в
turn
нули,
gradually,
около единицы
10 in the
превращаются
fifth, let's say
постепенно.
it's 5
10 в
zeros,
пятой, допустим, это 5
100,000,
нулей,
and
100
then in
тысяч.
general, it
А
turns
потом, в
into the
общем-то,
number 5.
превращается в цифру
That
5.
is, if
То
you
есть
see a
вы
number,
видите на
5
шкале
or 3,
масштабной
on the
оси
scale of
какую-то
the scale
цифру, там
axis,
5 или 3,
mentally translate it
мысленно
into the
переводите
number
это
of
в
zeros at
количество нулей
1.
у единиц.
That
То
is,
есть
it's
5
5.
это 100 тысяч,
That's
и 3 это
100,000, if 3.
там,
This,
1000,
and so
и так
on,
далее.
here.
Вот. И
And what does it give
что
us?
нам на это дает?
This
Нам
gives
дает
us
это
the
возможность
opportunity to compare
сравнивать
some of the
некоторые
locations of
расположения
various
различных
objects,
объектов,
such as,
таких как,
let's say,
допустим, вот здесь
here
видно
you can see
животные, от
animals from a
коловратки
small
маленькой
rotifer
до
to a redwood
секвойи,
whale on
кита
one piece of
на
paper.
одном листочке
In other words,
бумаги.
they are
То есть
all
они все
comparable
здесь
here.
сопоставимы,
It's
это
all
все
natural.
закономерно.
Moreover,
Более того,
on
на
the
том
same
же
piece
самом
of paper,
листочке, на
on the
следующем
next
слайде вы
slide,
видите
you see
прекрасно,
perfectly that
что
all the
расположены
objects of
все
the
объекты
universe that
Вселенной,
modern
которые знает
science knows
современная
are
наука, от
located, from
фундаментальной
the
длины
fundamental
Планка,
long
как
plank,
Максимона, до самой
from maxim
метагалактики.
to
И
the
все это
metagalaxy
помещается
itself.
очень
All this fits
закономерно,
very
законно
naturally,
на
legally on
одном
one piece of paper.
листочке. Казалось
It
бы,
would
совершенно
seem, at first glance,
на
a
первый взгляд
theoretically
такая
mathematical
теоретически
exercise, but when I
математическое
began to
упражнение,
explore this
но
axis,
когда я
I
стал
suddenly
исследовать эту
discovered that the
сказать,
objects of
ось,
the
я вдруг
universe are
обнаружил,
not
что объекты
randomly
Вселенной
arranged.
расположены
They
не
are
хаотично,
located on this
они
scale
расположены
axis
на этой
very
масштабной оси
periodic.
очень даже периодически.
Here on
Вот на
this
этом слайде
slide,
вы видите,
you can
что там
see
есть
that there is a
период,
period,
12
12 half
полуволн,
waves, called
это
a
назвал
large-scale
масштабной
wave of
волной
stability.
устойчивости.
Here, and a
Вот
very
и очень
interesting
интересная
law is
закономерность
also that
заключается
there
еще
is a
в том,
living
что
cell
точно в центре
exactly
этого
in the
всего
center of
масштабного
this entire
диапазона от
scale
самого
range,
маленького объекта
from
до
the
самого
smallest
большого
object to the
находится живая
largest.
клетка.
The average
Средний
size
размер
of a
живой
living
клетки
cell is
находится
located exactly
точно
in
в
the
центре
center of the
масштабного
large-scale
периода
period of the
Вселенной. А
universe.
именно,
Namely,
живая
a
клетка
living
во
cell
столько
is so
раз
many times larger
больше
than the fundamental Planck length.
фундаментальной длины
How many
Планка,
times it is smaller
во сколько раз
than the entire
она меньше
metagalaxy.
всей метагалактики.
And this
И
is a
это
very interesting pattern.
очень интересная
Moreover, the
закономерность.
man himself, with
Более
his
того,
average
сам
height,
человек с
is
его
so many
средним
times
ростом
bigger
во
than the
столько
virus,
раз
the
больше
smallest
вируса,
particle.
мельчайшей частицы,
How
во
many
сколько раз
times
он
he is
больше
bigger than the
биосферы, самой
biosphere,
большой
the
системы
largest system of
жизни.
life.
То есть
In
мы с
other
вами
words,
находимся в
we are in the
масштабном центре
large-scale center
диапазона
of the
жизни на
range of
Земле.
life on Earth. And
И
in this
в связи с
regard,
этим я бы хотел
I would like to read a
зачитать
wonderful
замечательное
poem by
стихотворение
Arseny
Арсения Тарковского
Tarkovsky,
в 50-е
written
годы
in the
написанное.
50s. I am a man.
Я
I
человек,
am in the middle of the
я
world.
посредине мира.
Behind
За
me are
мною
myriads
мириады
of infusoria. In front of
Передо
me are
мною
myriads of
мириады
stars.
звезд.
I'm
Я
between
между
them,
ними
lek,
лег во весь
at my
свой
full
рост.
height.
Два берега
Two shores
связующие
connecting
море,
the sea,
два
two
космоса,
spaces connecting the
соединившие
bridge.
мост.
Here,
Вот.
well,
Ну, поэты
poets
и
and artists,
художники, я об этом
I will
буду
talk about
рассказывать в
this in my
очередных
next
каких-то
meetings.
своих
They are
встречах. Они
always ahead
всегда
of the
опережают
development of the
развитие
worldview of
мировоззрения,
scientists and
ученых,
philosophers,
философов,
sometimes
иногда
by
на 100
100
лет,
years,
иногда
even
даже на
more.
больше.
So we
Итак,
We
мы
are
с вами
getting down to
приступаем
today's
к
topic.
сегодняшней теме.
Today's
Сегодняшняя
topic
тема
is the 5
это
steps of ascent from the cage to the star
5 ступеней
civilization.
восхождения от клетки до звездной цивилизации.
What is it
О чем
about?
идет речь?
Now,
Вот если
if
мы
we
с
go
вами
back
опять
to this
вернемся к
large-scale wave
масштабной
again,
волне, то
we
мы
will see
увидим,
that
что
life
жизнь
takes only
занимает
3
на
half
этом
waves on this
диапазоне
range.
всего 3
This is 3 half
полуволны.
waves. Each
Это
half
3
wave is 5
полуволны,
orders of
каждая
magnitude,
полуволна 5
and that turns
порядков,
out to be
итого
15
получается
orders of
15
magnitude.
порядков.
If we put
И
these
15
15
порядков,
orders
если
of
мы вынесем в
magnitude into a
отдельную
separate
картинку,
picture,
то мы
we will
получим
get these
такие
3
три
half waves.
полуволны.
The first half
Первая
wave is
полуволна
5 orders
5
of
порядков.
magnitude.
Это
It is
одноклеточная,
unicellular,
вторая
it is
это
multicellular,
многоклеточная,
it is a
третья это
biocenosis.
биоценоз.
and with a very high degree of accuracy. And so I want to note here that when I say that there is a very high degree of accuracy, naturally we are talking about medium sizes. And if anyone is interested in how high the degree of accuracy of these average sizes is, then they can refer to my book, which is displayed here. I have it posted on my website in electronic form. If you want, you can buy it in paper form. And believe me, all the sizes, all the figures I refer to are given there in detail, where they are taken from, how they are calculated, why the average size is taken this way, they are this way. In other words, all questions will disappear when you get acquainted with this book. So, what do we have? If we depict all this more clearly, then we have 3 levels of development: unicellular, multicellular, biocenosis. Here it is very visible in the picture well. But in order to understand how it all develops, it is necessary to turn this same pattern into some 3 stages of development. These 3 stages of development are shown in the picture on the next slide. They are shown in such a way that we see that there are 5 orders of unicellular, then the next stage. 5 orders of magnitude are occupied by multicellular, and 5 more orders, the next stage of development, is occupied by biocenosis. Why are they depicted as steps? Because at first there were unicellular ones, the stage developed, then the next stage, multicellular, then biocenosis. Let's take a closer look at how it all happened. The SHA is the first, unicellular. There are 5 orders of magnitude from the virus to the infusoria, that is, 10 to the 5th degree of difference. They have been developing 4 billions of years and occupied this interval. If this interval is placed on some conditional ladder, it is visible on this slide with such a vague future, which we will now try to predict. Then you see, in the lower left corner, there is such a cell that occupies these 5 orders of magnitude and has developed 4 billions of years. The next step, the next stage of development, these are multicellular, the same 5 orders. And in this general picture, we will see the second stage of development, the third step. This is the world of biocenosis, the same 5 orders. There are exactly 5 orders of magnitude from a small lake to the entire biosphere, and then we transfer these 5 orders. We see the next stage of development, the biocenosis, which rests on the size of the Earth. So we have built a staircase of 3 steps: unicellular, multicellular, and biocenosis. Well, what's next? And then we do not have a 4th step on the attraction of scale, but there is a 3rd plus the 1st step, the 4th. But it is such a tricky, convolutional step that led to the unification of all previous trends into one completely new world. This is the world of societies. The world of societies occupies. Societies, it's from family to humanity. Society, this is a family. This is a working collective. This is a city. This is a country. This is a civilization. This is all of our humanity as a whole. And here you see these stages. They also occupy exactly 5 orders of magnitude, and at the same stage as the biocenosis. They developed in parallel with the biocenosis. So these societies, they complete the development of life on Earth. This is the final stage. Here. And we already have 3 full-fledged stages: unicellular, multicellular, biocenosis, societies next to them. It's like a closed loop. Why? Because then 5 orders of magnitude, if we apply with you, we will go beyond the Earth. And this is where I want to move from generalization to forecasts. And forecasts in science are most often made by extrapolation. What is extrapolation? I will remind those who have forgotten. This is when we have some kind of trend, which we trace according to some data, and we take and extend it theoretically further. We have the right to do this. We have. Justified. It's never anyone knows how much extrapolation is justified. But the simplest scientific method is to extrapolate. A small digression. If we have, let's say, torsional scales, and we determine the gravitational constant in the laboratory, then we extrapolate that this gravitational constant acts in the same way in other parts of the universe, not only here in our little cone, but also outside the Earth, and inside the galaxy, and in the metagalaxy. And we're starting to extrapolate that. But we are. This is science, of course. And to what extent this is justified is another question. But that's how all science works. It extrapolates the obtained patterns to the whole surrounding world. We will follow the path that we have the only one, in fact, because we have no other methods to determine the future. But, only in this case, we will extrapolate a large-scale pattern, and add another 5 orders of magnitude to the size at which we have just stopped. Adding these 5 orders of magnitude, you and I will get 9.5 is 10⁻⁴ centimeters. This is the diameter of the biosphere. If we add 5 more orders of magnitude, we get 14.5. 9.5 plus 5. Simple arithmetic. What is the beauty of this method, which allows you to use simple rulers, simple arithmetic? We get 14.5 orders of magnitude. This is the size, which for us in this case is purely theoretical. We deduced it simply by extrapolation. And let's see in practice what corresponds to this size. It turns out that exactly this size has asteroids, and a belt that Tsiolkovsky assumed would be mastered by mankind at the very beginning of its journey into space. Moreover, following Tsiolkovsky, the American cosmologist Davis began to develop an idea that was eventually named after him, really called the concept of a sphere, but not Davis, sorry, Dyson. Davis, I'm confused. Davis is a cosmologist, indeed. Dyson was also an American scientist. Dyson sphere. Here on the slide, you see what is a Dyson sphere. Dyson sphere. This is some hypothetical, from the point of view of American cosmologist astronomers, with which everyone else in the world agreed, the place of humanity's existence at the next stage, when humanity goes into outer space, begins to explore this space with the help of technical means. The dimensions exactly correspond to our calculation with you. Here. And you and I can then build our ladder to the top, adding 5 more orders of magnitude there, as can be clearly seen on this slide, and get there some imaginary world in which, from my point of view, only cyber civilization can exist. Why cyber civilization? This is a separate topic. I will try to consider it in one of the conversations. For now, just believe that a person has nothing to do inside this Dyson sphere. Well, what's next for the Dyson sphere? Here we hypothetically, with the help of a simple application, so to speak, a ruler, built a Dyson sphere mentally on a scale axis, and then what do we have behind it? And then there are 2 variants of the development of events. The first scenario that we can assume is as follows. We will develop further within the sum of the technologies that we have. In other words, we will make not just rockets, but very good rockets. I conditionally called them a very good Osher rocket. And on these ochres we will move. By the way, this is what Elon Musk constantly tells us fairy tales about. He tells us how we will master Mars in the ochres, colonize it. Then he went on. Whether in 1,000 years, I don't remember, or in 2,000 years, he predicts the development of the entire galaxy. He says that if we use rockets to move around the galaxy, then in 1,000 years, with the help of our rockets, we will be able to master. That is, this method, which is actually described in all almost fantastic novels, in films of the 20th century. However, some science fiction writers have come to the conclusion that it's not all interesting and good. They began to come up with some kind of black holes, wormholes, through which a person can instantly pierce space, arise in a completely different place. But these are completely unfounded fantasies so far. The only thing that is real and technical development as is moving on rockets. But here we ask the question, and how much is this movement on rockets really logical from the point of view of ordinary logic and extrapolation? Before that, we will look with you at this very simple slide, which depicts the stages of a long road of vehicle development. The first stage, a man who was traveling at a speed of 5 kilometers per hour. Then the next stage. This is a man on a horse. The speed has increased 4-fold to 20 kilometers per hour. The next stage is a car. The average speed is 100 kilometers per hour, and the speed has increased 5 times. The next stage. The speed of the aircraft increased 1,000 kilometers per hour, respectively, 10-fold. The next stage. Rockets. We are not moving on rockets yet, but astronauts are already moving 40,000 kilometers per hour, for example. That is, the speed has already increased 40 times. In other words, we see that the speed is growing. This is the first thing we see. The speed increases exponentially. That is, the speed increases. The speed increases. That is, the derivative outgrowths of the speed. There is acceleration, which leads to an exponential. This is the first thing we see. And the second thing we see some steps, stages of qualitative changes. A man on foot, a man on horseback. A man on a horse, a man to us cars. A man on a car, a man on a plane, a man on a plane, a man on a rocket. All of these methods differ qualitatively from each other. In other words, we must come to the conclusion that the trend of development of means of movement in space has two patterns. The first pattern, the growth of speed, and the second, the qualitative jumps of the transition from one method to another. And we ask a simple question, and what will happen next? So we settled on rockets, and we have only 2 options, colleagues. Option 1, is that we will travel the remaining hundreds of years of our future, thousands of years of our future, millions of years of our future on these very rockets, improving them, increasing the KBD from 3% to 6%, 6% to 15%, increasing the speed of 40,000 kilometers to 100,000 kilometers, maybe even approaching with the help of photonic engines to the speed of light. But it is precisely these rockets that will become for us forever, so to speak, a means of transportation. This is the first option we can assume. But this option clearly goes against the trend that we are seeing. There are also high-quality horse races. And the second option is that we will master a completely new way of moving, not rocket, which, for example, no one can even imagine even now. Well, I can say that some people assume, including Pitts. I assume that this new way of moving with the help of so-called UFOs, in fact there may be something else, will allow us to move through the space of the universe without inertia at a speed much higher than the speed of light. When I say with a speed higher than the speed of light, I do not mean that the speed of light has no limit. Yes, the speed of light has a limit of 300,000 kilometers per second. And it is pointless to argue with this, because it has been experimentally confirmed many times. I'm talking about completely different ways of moving. Which ones? We'll talk about this later. And one more slide, also very interesting. A slide that concerns the transmission of our information. How did we transmit the information before? They shouted with a voice, the speed of sound. Then messengers began to carry letters. Then messengers began to move on horses. Then on trains, cars. The signal transmission rate grew until it grew to the speed of light. Practically, we are transmitting speed now, we have signals. This is the speed of light. In other words, electromagnetic oscillations propagate at the speed of light. Thus, we jumped from 100 kilometers, from 1,000 kilometers on airplanes, to 100,000, to 300,000 kilometers per second. In other words, from our point of view, information is instantly distributed throughout the Earth. If I'm there right now, let's say I'm calling from my mobile, I can call to the other side of the Earth. There can be practically no question of any delay. But if you and I use the same connection to start communicating with the interlocutor on the moon, and God forbid, even on Mars, then we will get a very large time delay. There it will already be calculated in minutes. And when we communicate, we, for example, ask, well, let's say there, Vasya from Mars, hello, how do you feel there? Then we mark the time. 8 minutes will be the signal to go to Mars. Vasya will answer us. Okay, 8 minutes back. For example, I say, I don't remember now how much time there is, but communication with such delays, it becomes simply unbearable completely. That is, even within the solar system, communication with the help of electromagnetic signals, which seem to us very fast, becomes very dreary. Is there any other way to transmit information signals? Many esotericists talk about this, and many scientists are also thinking about it now. I must say that I also delved into this area and calculated that there, yes, indeed, it is possible to increase the speed. By 20 orders of magnitude, by 15, by 20, by 25, the speed of information transmission can be increased. At the expense of what? Due to the fact that we are moving from electromagnetic vibrations to completely different processes that go on inside the ether. In an ethereal medium, the signal velocity propagates an order of magnitude faster than the speed of light. Well, and to make it clear, well, let's say, with the help of thought, I'll reveal a little secret. I think it's a thought. We can transfer information to the other side of the universe in a tenth of a second. That is, almost instantly to the other side of the universe. In other words, there is a certain medium through which our thought receives information at a tremendous speed, almost instantaneously. So, we assume that a qualitative leap awaits us not only in the movement of transport, but also in the transmission of signals. And if these two qualitative leaps happen, then you and I on this slide will obviously become inside the galaxy. For us, the whole galaxy will become our home. Why? Because in an instant, we can practically move from one edge of the galaxy Troika galaxy. In an instant, we can practically transfer information back and forth. In other words, all these huge, seemingly insurmountable distances, they will disappear for us. Just as for a savage, let's say, these huge distances disappear from Australia when he gets on a plane and flies, let's say, to America somewhere, where he is shown as a savage from Australia. Yes. In other words, this is a qualitative leap for us, which, I repeat, logically goes out of the trend that we have seen in the past. And then we will do it with you 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth check, on the fifth step, we will reach the level of cosmic civilization. What is a space civilization? This, I want to say right away, is a great mystery. Why? Because no one knows what humanity will turn into when it reaches this level. Whether we will remain in our bodies, or, as it is said in the New Testament, we will not be in our bodies. Or we will stay in our bodies, we will move instantly at the same time. We can fantasize about this topic indefinitely, but the general trend leads us to this. And now we turn to the second part of our conversation. So, we continue our predictive conversation about the future of humanity. We have the 13th Shah, which I called the global transformation of humanity. Two options. What is it about? The fact is that when we considered these steps, it was a purely formal forecast. Well, they added 5 orders of magnitude. They added 5 orders of magnitude. And can we go deeper into this process? Can we consider any details? Does our methodology allow us to do this? Yes, it does. That's what we're going to do with you now. But I want to warn you right away that we will consider 2 options here. The first option, this is the so-called vector future. This is a one-way option for everyone. What is one way for everyone? I will explain now. The fact is that not only scientists think about the future. Many religions think about the future. They give forecasts, and esotericists also think about the future. They have their own forecasts. Communicating with priests and with many mystics, with scientists, I came to an unexpected quasi-discovery for myself. It turned out that esotericists, very religious people, priests and scientists see the future quite differently. That's completely different. And at the same time, they can't agree on anything with each other at all. This is a topic that will be outlined in my book of the next release. It is planned literally there this month. By the end of the year, it should be published in this publishing house, in which I am here. But on the slide, you can see that there are 3 vectors. Esotericism sees the man of God as a man who will develop within the limits of his inner abilities. Religion sees the transformation of a person into some spiritual essence disembodied. Well, for example, there is nirvana dissolution, moving to the kingdom of heaven, and so on. And for the most part, science sees a person as a cyborg. And we will now consider one of these options, the most suitable for consideration. Because we will not be able to consider all the other options now, there will not be enough time, so to speak. We will consider the simplest scientific variant of the transformation of a person in the future in some transhumanistic person, or a non-transhumanistic person. In other words, what will happen to a person who, if humanity follows the path of technocratic development? That's the technocratic way humanity has gone. And we will consider an option that should end, from my point of view, with the creation of a cyber civilization in the solar system. What is it about? Let's start with argument number 1. Here on this slide, we can clearly see what? We see that in the course of the evolution of life on planet Earth, many processes and many phenomena occur in it. But in particular, there is a complication, and we will highlight only one phenomenon here, namely, living systems are gradually saturated with mineral components and bone components. But I can say that you and I are made up of 70% water, and these are minerals. It is not living water. Well, it is conditionally, of course, alive, but practically there are no biological molecules there. And how our bones consist of 70% of the mineral component. In other words, we are 70% made of mineral components. But viruses consist exclusively of biological molecules. These are proteins, lipids, RNA, DNA. There is not an ounce of bone matter there. They are purely biological. The smallest primary cells were biological. Gradually, in the course of evolution, this mineral component increased from cells to multicellular ones. And if we take the next stage, societies, then we will find an even more interesting thing here. It turns out that societies, they are here, there is such a figurative picture. The technosphere is 30 times more massive than the entire biosphere. That is, if we take the living mass of all forests, elephants, something, bacteria, viruses, birds, bugs, and sum it up. Then we will get a mass of about some number of trillion tons, for example, right? But this is what scientists from Leicester have calculated. I trust them. And it turned out that the bone products that we created, that is, this building, roads, bridges, and so on, they are already 30 times more in mass than the entire biosphere now. But we can even determine this by the ratio of our mass in our house. Imagine that you have 1,000 tenants living in a house there. Imagine if we multiply 1,000 tenants by 100 kilograms. What will we get? Well, 100 tons. And the building will weigh, well, not 100 tons exactly there, 10 times, or even 30, or even 50 times more. In other words, we create a world that is a component, a part of society, because society. It's not just people, believe me, it's the whole system. Just as we have mineral components inside, there are bone components inside society. All of these roads, cars, planes, buildings, bridges, etc., are part of a living system of societies. And it turns out that there is already a mass, so to speak, ours with you, it is close to 1%. The biological mass in society is close to 1%. Look, 100%. Virus, next. 30% in a person and 1% in societies. And what's next? And then, quite obviously, if we create a cyber civilization, then we will have completely bone components. These are silicon, metals, there will be no biology. Why is there no biology? Because any biological life is based on water. And water in space, as we know, it either evaporates or freezes instantly. Therefore, there is no place for a living organism in outer space. In an open solar system, there is no space in the solar system at all. And you can fight it as much as you want, but if we get to that, I'll tell you why. It is absolutely incredible that people will have to master the spaces of the solar system with the help of cyber civilization. And why do we need it? Well, the slide here shows the Earth surrounded by a number of satellites up to white dots, such as a swarm of flies around the Earth. In other words, according to the Vernadsky principle, life develops as follows. She strives to fill all the space around her. Yes, indeed, man first mastered the land, then the ocean, then the air, now he goes into space. It's obvious. This film shows the increasing pace of development. Now let's take a break for 1 minute. Let's watch this movie. So, you can see that the rate of increase in space exploration, they're huge. But then a question arises, but with a point, a philosophical question that many create. And why do we need all this? Here on the slide, for example, I just gave, about 500 million years ago, Kistiper and fish began to explore the land. And here you can see on the slide, one brushfin fish asks another brushfin fish that crawled onto land, "Natasha, what have we gotten ourselves into?" But here you can see a jumping fish, which still lives in the mud. That is, why did the fish need to master the land? What's the point? This is a separate topic. But I want to say that if the brushfin fish did not begin to master the land, then I would not be sitting in front of you right now, and would not tell you anything. All life would still be in the ocean. It means that there was some kind of supreme plan in this development. Exactly the same is the supreme plan in space exploration. But from the point of view of our egoistic perception, open space, this is a habitat for cyber systems, which we need so that we can get energy and materials there. I think that automatic systems and robots will explore outer space after all, and we must create an official cyber civilization there. What will it give us? This will give us a solution to resource problems, energy and mineral. In other words, our energy sources may run out sooner or later, and solar energy, which will, at least this energy, be collected on panels, it will be endless for us. The same with minerals. So we need to go out there for resources. This is the first one. Second, how are we going to do this? I believe that in the Dyson sphere, first of all, automatons and robots will work, which will be connected avatarically to some people, who will solve their problems if they cannot solve them. In other words, it will be cyber civilization. It will be avatar controlled by people. This slide shows how this can happen. Now the first steps of the hand are being made in this direction. Is that what it's about? Let's assume that we have an open solar system within the asteroid belt that begins to be mastered by these automata. Stations are being built, power stations that capture solar energy and send it to Earth. I want to say that this is not fiction at all. There are 3 state programs in countries such as the United States, Japan, and China for the development of space energy. And unfortunately, I have to say that we were the first. I was once at a reception at the directorate of the Kurchatev Institute, and we were told that they had a department in which everything was absolutely calculated in this regard, how to master space energy. But perestroika began, the department was closed, all documentation was destroyed practically, and all this collapsed. That is, we are now left in the tail, and the 3 sides are still striving to master space energy. In other words, these are not just my fantasies. These are very serious state programs. We don't need energy there. And let's assume that we have begun to master this energy. And how are we going to do it? I repeat again, I have talked. I personally know some cosmonauts. We have talked with them. We will challenge. They are divided into 2 camps. Some believe that only living astronauts should master it all. And some cosmonauts believe that there is nothing for a person to do in space. Nothing at all in the open. Well, there are some adjustments in orbits there and all that kind of stuff, but automatons and robots should master space. I am inclined to this point of view. I believe that yes, why not? Let them master. Why should we climb into these open spaces, in these cans? We will be sitting on the ground, on the shore of a beautiful lake with a fishing rod, and suddenly we get a signal that some of our robot, to which we are attached, has got into a dead-end situation. We connect to this robot with the help of some, maybe even a chip implanted in our head. And we see a picture that it exists somewhere, let's say on Mars or on an asteroid. And we turn on our humorous thinking and suggest some solutions to him. He makes this decision, then we switch off, continue to fish. And the robot continues to work for us. So here is such an external task. If we create it, and after a while we can create it, then our Earth will be surrounded by such a ring. And I wanted to draw your attention to this picture, that here is the same pattern 1 to 10 in the 5th, namely the core and shell. That is, the Earth has a size of 10 to the 9th degree of centimeters and a half, and the Dyson sphere is 10 to 14 and a half. This is the ratio of 1 to 10 to 100,000. This is a scale axis of 5 orders of magnitude. Exactly the same proportion between the nucleus of an atom, and exactly the same proportion between the size of our genome and you and us. That is, each of us is 100,000 times larger than his original genome. In other words, this proportion is universal. It's in space. We talked about it. It's been around for a long time. Therefore, here too, from the point of view of this predictive technique, everything is fine. But we talked about resource tasks. But what will it give us for the development of ourselves, people? We take care of ourselves first of all. And on this slide, I tried to depict all this already in the form of some kind of sequential evolutionary step-by-step evolution of life. The first, smallest living organisms, they were viruses. Viruses have the ability to reproduce, and that's it. No more ability for anything. Reproduction. Moreover, reproduction in foreign cells. I do not know if the viruses appeared first. There are still disputes that viruses appeared second, cells appeared first. I'm just saying that viruses have only one quality in terms of complexity: the ability to reproduce itself. The cage. This is a more complex system. It's about 30,000 times bigger than the average virus there. In addition to the ability to divide and reproduce itself, she has another ability: metabolism. The ability to absorb a substance, digest it, decompose, complicate, and throw away waste. That is, it also feeds the cell. The next stage is already a plant. The plant also has the ability to reproduce itself with the help of seeds. In the same way, they have the ability to metabolize. That is, they absorb something, digest, and throw it away. But they have another ability. It's rusty. They are able to grow and develop. If you plant a seed, you will see how it happens. A small sprout gradually turns into a tree. The cells don't have that. Viruses don't have this, but plants already do. The next stage of development in life is the ability to self-move. There are animals that also have the ability to reproduce themselves, metabolism, growth from the embryo. But self-movement is also added. Paws, wings, some flippers, and we begin to move on our own. This is a new property of life that appeared after plants developed. Animals appeared that began to feed on these plants and received new properties. And finally, a man appears. A man. It is clear. Self-reproduction, metabolism, growth, movement, everything is there. And what is not in the living world? What else does a person have? What new human properties has this living world brought? Two properties: the ability to work and the ability to create. But the ability to work and create is completely absent in animals. There are some animals, such as insects, ants, that are able to do something, but they do it, create work, build anthills there. Or bees make honeycombs according to a genetic program. That is, they have one program that allows them to do something. But this is an exception to the rule. Most animals don't work. And all we do is work for 8 hours, sometimes some for 12 hours, plow, plow, and plow. But man also has the ability to be creative, which no animal has. That's why we created this wonderful world with this studio, including this camera, with this ability for me to communicate with you. But the animals could not create this. In other words, we are not only hard workers, but we are also creators. And if we talk from the point of view of the evolution of human ideas about oneself, if we look at possible religious sources, then the first thing we talked about was that a person. This is a servant of God. Then they began to say that a person is no longer just a rack, but he is a servant of the Lord. Then they began to say, in the New Testament it is well described that a person will eventually become a co-worker with Christ. Do you understand? This is no longer a slave, not a servant. This is already a co-worker. The level is rising. And we can extrapolate the trend, say that a person will eventually become a co-creator, but he is already a co-creator. God, the Creator, and then the Father. But we are creating with you, and we have this property. And we have to develop this property. I must say that this property of creating is the main property for a person. And those robots that we are so afraid of, they, from my point of view, going back to the old slide, should eventually take away from us our property and ability to work. And we have to hand over all the work to these robots. Let them do it. Robots, they are created by us so that they work for us, and we will leave ourselves only one function: creative, fantastic. And you look at which professions are now the most in demand and the most paid. Intelligent, creative, programmers who write programs. Isn't that creative? And let a man with a shovel, a skyle with a sledgehammer, try to find a job now. In modern society, there is no such work there. Over time, robots will work in all industries, and there will be no place left for human production at all. Naturally, we have a tail with you. We sometimes go out there to collect mushrooms, catch fish with a fishing rod. In other words, we have a collective function here. In the same way, we may still have some areas in which a person wants to work, well, so something there with his hands, for example, or assemble something there with his hands. It will all remain as a hobby, just like we have a hobby of picking mushrooms, berries, let's say, they're in the garden to dig. In the same way, there will be a hobby to work with. And the most important function for a person. This is a function that relates to his creative abilities. I know many people who, thanks to their development of intelligence and creative abilities, have achieved great success. Huge successes, including social and monetary ones, and went abroad, among other things. Well, I know, for example, a family in which an orphan, thanks to his education, which his grandmother gave him, from a practically impoverished family, has now managed to advance thanks to his intellectual abilities, has managed to advance. And now he is in Europe. He already has citizenship. He already has housing there. His wife is Japanese. He has already conquered almost all the peaks. He has already signed up for the cosmonaut squad. Here, jumping with a parachute, is a man who completely feels great in modern society. But I saw him as a 2-year-old boy there, and saw how he gradually turned from this boy, so to speak, into a good student, an excellent student, and how he entered the Gubkin Institute, and how he then. It was all solely due to his abilities, due to the development of his intellect. And the people who invest in their intellect and creativity, I am sure, are the people of the future. And so for me, for example, the future. This is not the future of the people transhumanists see in their fantasies. In other words, these are some kind of cyborgs who will move mechanically like robots there, or some kind of transferred consciousness of some kind there. Well, let them. If they want to transfer their consciousness into some kind of automaton, let them transfer it. It's their choice. They will want to live there inside this piece of iron. Let them live. I think that's the main thing. It's in this warehouse. He is creative, harmonious, like a cosmoplanetary person. Why? Yes, because neither robots nor machines have any creative abilities and will not be in the near future. What is creativity for modern science? As our ancestors said, this mystery is great. They don't know. And since they don't know, how can they give creative abilities to their products? That's when they find out, maybe, that's when they can ascend and turn into radiant humanity. So we have considered the mono option. I chose only one path on purpose, technocratic. In fact, I repeat once again, there are religious options, there are esoteric options. I have not specifically touched on them here, because we are now going to leave such wilds with you. And the second option that I want to consider is the so-called fan-shaped future of humanity. What is the fan-shaped future of humanity? I'm showing you what a fan is. The fact is that the exit in the universe can lead to the emergence of a tree of cosmic life. What is it? It will be an ecosystem of the mind with a huge variety of forms of intelligent life. Ecosystem. There are many species, thousands, hundreds of thousands of species, millions of species that live harmoniously together. Disputes about which one future of humanity in space can be likened to an example with some demiurgists. At the beginning of land exploration, we see that a gigantic variety of animals has evolved from these brush-finned fish. And this is the animal diversity that we see here, the tree of evolution, yes, millions. Tens of millions of species have emerged from one cell, but it was one cell, and they say that it was flagellated, that is, there is even one kind. Why can't we assume that from some special subspecies of humans, the same tree will not arise when these people will go into space? And here on the slide, I tried to depict it in the form of such an evolutionary tree there, in which, starting from 20 years gradually, so to speak, the cyborg here will remain somewhere, maybe in near space, here. And then, perhaps, it will be robots and aliens and the world of esoteric magic. That is, perhaps we will see such a tree up there on the next slide. Here I have specially depicted a part. Half of the tree is technocratic, and half is so religious and mystical. And you and I, carefully examining this slide, see that just as the kiss-keepers and fish that came out turned into a giant tree of diversity in the same way when some people go into space. Again, some people, not all people want to go into space there and turn into something that is. There is a giant tree of various types of space. We can assume. And why not? If tens of millions of different living beings have evolved from one cell, why can't we assume that it won't happen from one person? Then ourselves. Well, you can look at this slide carefully by stopping the recording. Here, all of this will be described in a book that is planned for release. And I must say that not all fish wanted to get out of the ocean. Moreover, some mammals have returned back there, such as whales and dolphins. Therefore, no one is forcing those people who want to live on Earth to stay here. Therefore, there is a place prepared for them here in the picture, which I called rooted earthlings. That is, people who want to stay on Earth will stay on Earth. Who's going to stop them? Just like some fish, but most remained to live in the ocean. But those fish who wanted to come out of the ocean to land and came out and gave a further stage of the evolutionary path. In the same way, some people are very mobile, very creative, who want to go beyond the planet. They will come out. And from them, just such a big tree of future life will arise in the future. So, let's summarize. Option 1. Oh, yeah. So, look, there are two options here. When a person is going to go into space, two options are theoretically possible for him. The first option, the universe is lifeless, life originated only on Earth, and our entry into space is like the exploration of Antarctica. The empty, lifeless, icy spaces of the universe are just for us. An understandable option. We're alone. The universe is inhabited by an infinite number of cosmic civilizations. Our civilization, which has not even been born yet, is a fetus in the womb. Other civilizations are looking after our development, but the development itself follows a typical cosmogenetics program. After being born as a space civilization, we will be prepared to transfer all the knowledge and skills accumulated by previous space civilizations. And we are waiting for a space birth, a space childhood, a space youth, and finally, a space adult activity. Here are two options. Choose which one you like best. No one knows which one of them is actually real, believe me. But you can fantasize about this topic both this way and that. Well, once again, it is very important to note that not all people will want to follow the cosmic path. Most of them will probably stay on land, well, on Earth. We will go out and unsuccessful exit attempts, let's say on land, for example. There are some jumping fish that are still floundering in the mud. They live there between the water and the land in this mud, yes. There are some flying birds that fly out there and try to flutter and fall back into the water. That is, there were different attempts, but only the brush-fin fish managed to complete this attempt successfully. The last section, which I called as follows, Why Humanity of the Universe. In other words, we reason with you from the point of view of our egoistic position. We want to go out somewhere, we want to see something there, we want to improve our lives. And now imagine that here we are in the position of the whole universe, looking at us from above, yes. And this universe looks at this Earth and thinks, why do I need humanity, this universe, if it is alive, for example? Let's also reflect on this topic with you. And there is also the same logic, the same extrapolation. Here on the slide, you can see the great cycles of rebirth. The whole problem is that there are no material forms in the universe that exist forever. Stars are born and die. Galaxies are born and die. Planets are born and die. Civilizations arise and perish. States arise and perish. Cities are born and then covered with sand. I'm sorry, I remind you, we are not eternal. There is nothing eternal in the universe at all. Material forms. I'm not talking about energy informational forms. We talked about this at a previous meeting, talking about the grain of the world spirit. You remember this meeting. And I'm talking about material forms. Now let's transfer this conclusion that we have made to the alien mind. We assume option 2. The universe is inhabited by alien civilizations. And this alien civilization, when it passed the path of its intrauterine development on some planet, it went into space. But it also has a lifetime, and it too, sooner or later, will have to grow old and crumble. Is it logical to assume? Yes, why not? If all forms are born and die, then why should another cosmic civilization be an exception? No. And now suppose that these cosmic civilizations that exist there somewhere unknown behind the eggshell of our knowledge, they begin to think, but how can they prolong their business? And how do we extend our business with you? We leave offspring and pass on our accumulated knowledge, wealth, our power for everything that we accumulate, pass on to our descendants. Children pass on to grandchildren, and so on. There is a chain of births, rebirths. We can assume the same about alien civilizations. They also need some kind of children. They also need to conceive, give birth, raise, educate, pass everything on to them by inheritance. Therefore,
Поэтому
I
я считаю,
believe that
что
we are
нас
waiting
ждет
for
с
you
вами
to pass the baton from some cosmic
передача
civilization,
эстафеты
maybe
от
from
какой-то
to
космической
cosmic
цивилизации, может быть,
civilizations,
от двух
a
космических
female and a
цивилизаций,
male,
женской и мужской,
maybe
может,
from
от
one
одной,
such cosmic
такого
hermaphrodite.
космического
It
гермафродита.
doesn't
На
really
самом деле
matter.
никакого значения не
That
имеет.
is,
То есть,
maybe from
может, от
10
10
parents.
родителей.
I think that
Я
when we
думаю,
are
что
finally
когда мы
formed
окончательно
and go into
сформируемся и
space,
выйдем в космос,
we
то
will
мы
receive
получим
information
информацию
from
от
this
этой
cosmic
космической
civilization.
цивилизации.
They will finish
Они
teaching
нас
us, they will teach us, they will test us, they will give us their accumulated knowledge, all their power, and we will continue the work they started. And what do we need to do for this? For us who live here at the present time, what tasks do we face? In this model, which I have created in front of you now, we are with you as if inside an egg. Imagine that we, all of humanity, are some kind of embryo, an unborn chicken that is inside the shell. This slide shows it clearly. No matter how good this shell is, but probably sooner or later we are still developing, we will break and run into the walls of this shell. And we need to be born, we need to hatch. In order for us to be born, we first need to develop to a mature fetus. And the mature fruit is a harmonious, living, integral humanity. And only after that we will need to break through the shell and come into contact with unearthly civilizations. Until we develop along the evolutionary track that we are destined for, it makes no sense for us to go into space. Because if we break through the shell of the ranch, it is unlikely that we will do it. We will get into a situation when we are born. It will be a stillborn human civilization that no one needs in space, including here. And when we are born, we will finally present our earthly civilization to the cosmic community, the cosmic mind. The question arises, will our parents help us to be born?
Помогут ли нам родиться наши родители?
And look at how chickens are born from eggs. Chicken, in my opinion, does not help them to hatch. So I think that we will also have to develop ourselves with you and hatch out and come out of our shell ourselves. Well, ending this whole conversation, I want to say that sooner or later, we are in this model that I am developing. I repeat again, this is not even a theory. It is not an axiom. It is not a truth. It is just a model built on the basis of the knowledge that we have received about the development of life along the scale axis. We will go out with you on 1, 2, 3, 4. To the fifth stage of space civilization. And what will happen next? Well, I would like to live to see it. The only thing I can say, on this slide, I specifically depicted that our life, human life in general, all people, and life in general, is the path from the biological world, through the social world, to the information divine world. In other words, this is an obvious trend. And here it can be seen how our horizons of perception of the world are expanding. Our perception of the world is expanding. If we follow this path, then we are going synchronously, in accordance with the universal plan. If we try to stop this path, somehow go back, somehow equate ourselves with some animals, and live only an animal life, it's like swimming against the universal river of evolutionary change. Well, try to swim against an ordinary river, against the current. It is unlikely that you will succeed and have enough strength for a long time. And you will swim against the evolutionary river of the universal scale, then not for long on. I think you are not strong enough for a long life. And if it's enough, then you will fall to the bottom exhausted. Therefore, I believe that despite the fantastic nature of the models that we have just reviewed, despite the seemingly fantastic nature of the forecasts that we have reviewed, they at least have some kind of logical basis. They have a logical basis. If not, I am waiting for questions about the logic that I have revealed to you. And at 7, I say goodbye to you, and you and I are waiting for the 6th meeting, in which we will consider. If we speak with humor, the accordion of the universe. In other words, the universe has, it turns out, two harmonious beginnings, yin and yang, and we are with you in the most detailed way with mathematics, so to speak, the mathematical apparatus. We will consider what kind of harmonics they are, how they interact, and what conclusions this leads us to from the point of view of practice. All the best. Thank you for your attention.